That would be
I'll get a better view first. Otherwise, so I'll stand up close to the 260. Okay. The next, continuing in this theme of sintered metal catalysts, is a contribution from Mexico, Department of Process Engineering, University of Metropolitan. Poor pronunciation, but classified by Gustavo Fuentes, and the title of his talk is really Understanding Sintering of Supported Metal Catalysts. Gustavo?
Thank you, Tom. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm Gustavo Fuentes from Metropolitan University in Mexico City. Iztapalapa is a suburb of Mexico City, and so it's hard to pronounce, I know. So I will be talking today of a topic that we're trying to advance for a number of years, and that is somewhere in between the presentations that you just saw today, and hopefully there will be a discussion as I don't agree with parts of any of the. No, I shouldn't say that. I will be polite, and I will say that I agree partially with some of the conclusions. No, the fact is that sintering is an important topic. Let me just acknowledge the people, so in case I get into a fight at the end, I won't have any problem dealing with that. The problem of migration of metals and oxides is really quite important, and catalyst sintering is just one of the problems that can be, that is associated with that. In principle, it has to do with the problem during synthesis, different types of synthesis, but also you can go into microelectronics, and that's an important issue, the fact that you have migration of both metals and oxides or even sulfides. So these are some of the changes that you may have in particles, in nanoparticles, and you can have either sintering, classical sintering, you can have redispersion, or you can have in situ changes depending on whether you have morphological changes. You can have a breaking up of the particles, many of the things that we saw today. Now, this is just an example of a redispersion process. Here you start with a flat metal layer of palladium, and depending on the treatment, you can have all sorts of morphologies depending on the way you do the treatment. This is a palladium and magnesium oxide. So you won't have sintering in the classical way, you will have redispersion. Now, the reason that there is sintering or redispersion, and that's obvious to most of you, is because supported metals and oxides are in a metal stable state either during synthesis or because they are put into a metal stable state once you change the atmosphere. And you will have either coarsening or clustering depending on the treatment that you're doing to the system. So you can actually go either way. Now, in going to the sintering, ripening process of crystallites, historically you have had kinetics as one of the sources of information to trying to determine what is the mechanism. Power law equations were used in the old literature to really determine what was going on. But the problem is that many of the predictions are frequently inadequate. There are many of the crystallite distributions do not conform to classical predictions, although I may say that's partially true. And in the case of the classical solutions, and I'm stressing the term classical, the models have some limitations. So we're trying to handle this problem. And what I will be dealing with is mathematical treatment at the mesoscopic scale of the basic equations that have to do with this. So I will, this is the standard treatment for Oswald ripening. You are assuming that there is wetting of the support. This is the surface-free energy minimization problem. The theoretical limit is a flat surface, although this is not correct. And the predicted distributions are, in many cases, incorrect. And that's something that we got interested in solving a number of years ago. So this just says the same thing. In general, it means that the larger particles grow at the expense of the small particles, but that is not exactly true. That's something that you may have different regimes depending on the characteristics of the system. And in general, the average size increases and the number of particles decreases, but also you can reverse the process, and it's also an Oswald-Rippling process. Now, just to show you what I'm talking about, in this case, this is a system that is catalyzed by gold particles. So it's a formation of silicium nanowires, and this is a classical example of sintering. You can see here the gold droplets, as they are called, growing as a function of time. And the funny thing, that's a catalyst for the growth of silicium nanowires. And this type of tapering that you see in the nanowires actually has to do with changes on the crystallites along the process. So actually what this tells is that in particular this one, you have a large particle of gold at the beginning that is losing gold atoms. As a result, you may just have at the end a small needle because you're losing atoms along the way. And this is another case. This is a Langmuir blotched films. I'll just, in this case, this is a two-dimensional problem we're dealing with too. And this is the type of kinetics that you get. So it's also an Oswald-Rippling process. Now, if we go back to the classical solution to the problem, that's the so-called Lifshitz-Sliasov-Wagner problem or solution. They solved it. Lifshitz and Sliasov published one paper. Wagner published another paper in '61, very close in time, although they were not interacting. So they solved this problem. This is really a three-dimensional problem. They were preoccupied with the growth of domains on 3 dimensions. And they, using supersaturated solid solutions, and they developed the so-called LSW theory. And these are the assumptions that they made. So this is a three-dimensional problem, and that it was applied to 2 dimensions to really sintering of catalysts. Sometime in the 70s, Wimblad and Jugstein published an important paper too, also in the mid-70s. And the solution is relatively simple. You just have to have a restriction, in this case of mass conservation. The problem is relatively simple, separation of variables problem, and this is the solution that we actually saw very closely in the previous talk. So that's a classical solution. Now the problem is if we go, let's say, to this nickel and spinel sinter catalyst, the particle size distribution is completely the opposite. So although you may expect in many of the cases to have this type of distribution, most data in the literature actually have tapering off to long particle size. Is it Oswald-Rippling or not? According to the classical solution, it wouldn't be, because you don't have the proper particle size distribution. What I will show is that we can deal with that nicely. Now, of course, there are alternatives. The LSW theory or solution is just one way of approaching the problem, because actually you have to do some simplification to the problem to get separation of variables problem. There are a bunch of different alternatives. We just heard about one, starting with the basic principles and then going up and doing the full simulation. But I will be talking back to this case. And I'm sorry, in this case I'm not talking about all the solutions that I just mentioned, just the classical LSW solution. Why is that not adequate? Well, because what we found in the case of Oswald-Rippening and also the Smoluchowski equation, that is another problem for the crystallite migration problem, is there really are single cases of more general solutions. So we tried to see if we could find a general solution using different alternatives, and we found that indeed we could. In the early 90s, Brown proposed a family of solutions for the LSW case, and actually he showed that the LSW case was not correct, or at least it was limited. However, there were problems with his solution, and also Copeland and Fortes, they corrected his solution, but they still have problems. We attacked the problem in a number of years ago, and reasonably well, although we also found some glitches in our solution that made us delay the advancement of the problem. The idea is very simple. Really, this is a particle size distribution, and this is a non-dimensional problem. Everything is non-dimensionalized. And the trick that we had to use to solve the problem is to realize that there were different criteria that were not being solved previously: the normalization, conservation of probability, and conservation of mass. So the problem is a simultaneous problem. And we also found that you had to integrate just on part of the domain, and that solved many of the solutions. I mean, made simpler the problem. This is a type of solution. We're getting analytical solutions, and that's an advantage because we can then easily deal with experimental results. We have the solutions, the particle size distributions. In this case, we have two free parameters. This is nu n contains all the information about the physics of the problem. That's really where you will have either diffusion coefficients, you will have rate constants, energies of absorption. So that's where everything is. And n gives you information about the way that the particles are really interacting with the surface. So these are just parameters that we obtain. So it's really a non-linear least squares problem. This is the type of solution, family of solutions that we get. This is for different orders, either if you have surface diffusion control, what we found, and I'm sorry this is a mistake, what we found is that you can go from the classical LSW solution back to the another particle size distribution where you have the tailing off to long particle sizes rather easily, just as a function of one parameter. And so how does that relate with the information? These are data that we got from a publication by T and other co-authors. And this is the way that you will see a particle size distribution once you normalize it properly using a proper non-dimensional structure for the radius and for the particle size distribution. This is a 15% palladium and silica alumina catalyst treated under these conditions. Okay, and this is the publication. So what we see is that the original distribution is the one on red, and the blue distribution is, no, I'm sorry, the blue distribution is the one that has the original data, and the red one is the one sintered after 4,000 hours. So these are the raw data. So you can tell that actually you're growing in size and you're spreading the distribution. But once you do this normalization, you get values that are very close. And this is the way you can fit it. We just used a standard nonlinear least squares process to get fits. And based on this, we can then, this is the distribution that was measured by TEM. And you can tell that the different values for n will give you different shapes, and they are well defined because they have to fulfill 3 criteria together. So it's not that you have more than 2 parameters to fit the results. It's really 2, and that will give you information about what's going on. So in this case, that's the best fit after 1,000 hours. After 4,000 hours, the same catalyst. This is the particle size distribution. Again, we get a value of n equals 2. That's even better, the fit in this case. And this is the case of a low-loaded platinum on alumina system. And you can tell also that there is a rather good fit. Also n equals 2 for a different sample. Now what about sintering kinetics? This is the predicted rate equation, and this is the way that we can fit the mean particle diameter as a function of time. This is the fit that we get. Best fit with n equals 2, 7% palladium, 15% palladium. We're talking sintering to 100 hours. This is sintering 4,000 hours. So actually, we're doing an independent prediction of the sintering order. And this is rather interesting. We use the values for 7% palladium to do the prediction of what will be the radius, the mean radius after 4,000 hours. And this is a rather striking prediction that we could make. Just based on this, on the dark spheres, those are the values for 7% palladium. We could get the rate equation just predicts that this will be the growth, and it matches the 15% palladium growth. Now, in the case of support to nickel, I wanted to present some more results. I'll just present these 2. N equals 2, different catalysts together, and we can also fit rather nicely well the particle size distribution in that case. And nickel is trickier, at least the data that we have seen, because of the dependence on the atmosphere. Something that I may mention, the initial particle size distribution have normally values under parameters that are different from the ones that you reach after a number of hours, because you expect to find the solution that, I didn't mention that, the solution that we're getting numerically is a stationary solution. So there is time, you need time for that stationary solution to develop. And actually, this is from the article by Lifshitz and Sliaso, and they correctly said that their prediction is valid just after initial period of time when you will have developing the distribution. With this, I conclude, and I'll just mention that we solved the Gersol discrepancy apparently between the predicted observed PSD and the theoretical prediction using this type of methodology. And we can do a lot of things. We get self-similar particle size distribution. Diffusion control is important in this case, and with this I finish. Thank you.
Okay, we have time for some questions. Yes, there's a question here. Could you please identify yourself?
By at the University of New Mexico. Thank you, Gustavo. Very nice talk, and happy to see that you're able to explain many of these size distributions and particle growth. What I wondered is, there is, of course, a lot of literature on osphole ripening in other fields, metallurgy in particular. And there it seems like the classical LSW distribution seems to fit. So do you have any explanation for why the conventional solution seems to work in some cases?
Yes, actually what we're finding is that in principle we just find a family of solutions. We're saying that the methodology first proposed by Lifshitz, Sliaso, and Wagner was intrinsically correct, but they made the way they got their parameters, they only found one of the solutions. But having just a family of solutions, it means that both in the case where you have the tail towards the small particles or towards the large particles are indeed valid within the framework. So it will depend, in that case, on the new parameter, and that has to do with the let's say, energetics and the kinetics of the process. So in principle, it is included.
And we have time for one more short one.
Yes, a short follow-up. We tried to do Monte Carlo modeling also of this simulation, and we'll show it tomorrow during a talk. And we found that the classical solution fits better for the Monte Carlo simulation rather than the one with the long tail. So we're still puzzled about that.
Well, I guess it depends on the parameter that you put into the Monte Carlo simulation, I would say.
Monte Carlo simulation is simply you let the atoms do whatever they want.
Yeah, but you have energetics in the interaction that might modify new, in my opinion, that we can talk about. Thank you.
Thank you.